It's an exciting day out here in the desert because behind me, I've got two big, hairy, go-anywhere machines, and between the two of them, they don't burn an ounce of gasoline. These are two legendary nameplates that have changed up their formulas for a changing world. The Hummer is returning after a few years away, and for the G-Wagon, this is just the latest evolution for one of the most in-demand vehicles around. We are here at Hungry Valley OHV in the high California desert, and we're gonna see what these two can do. But before we do that, there is one important thing that you should know, and that is the G-Wagon here. It is not just on a street tire, it's actually on a summer tire, because that is the only tire option here in the United States for this vehicle. And it's been a long time since we brought something out here without an all-terrain, so I have no idea what it's gonna do today, but we're gonna find out together. We're going to kick things off here in the Hummer, and while it's raising itself up to its full off-road height, it's going to give me a chance to tell you a little bit about what this GMC is rocking, not under the hood, but underneath me, where it has 3 motors, as its 3X trim name would suggest. One of those motors is on the front axle, and 2 of them are at the rear, one for the left and one for the right. And combined, those 3 motors output a ton of power, 830 horsepower, 1,200 pounds-feet of torque, and that's enough to get this giant vehicle from 0 to 60 miles an hour in just 3.5 seconds at our test track, even though it's wearing these ultra-aggressive 35-inch Goodyear mud terrain tires. But all that power might not help it here at the hill climb. We're going to put the Hummer's traction management to the test. Now, to start off, I'm going to put the Hummer in its off-road drive mode and put it at increased ride height. Off-road is meant for driving off-road, but there's also a terrain setting that's meant for sort of like steep hills and very loose stuff. So we're going to start on off-road, see how it does, and then move on to terrain if we need to. And then we'll also use the front and rear lockers if we need to. There aren't traditional lockers on this vehicle, but it has virtual lockers. And with those 2 electric motors on the rear, it can actually really precisely control torque sent to each wheel. We'll see how it does. Okay, off-road mode, traction control remaining on. Now, the other complicating factor for this vehicle is, of course, its weight. So, the Hummer EV SUV weighs over 9,000 pounds. I wish I could tell you a precise number, but it actually weighs too much for us to get a reading on it on our scales. It just kind of throws an error. Here at the start of the hill, off-road mode, it doesn't look like it's gonna do it. It's getting a lot of wheel slip at 3 of the 4 wheels, so we're gonna back it down, put it in terrain, and see if she does any better. So now we are in the terrain drive mode, and I hit accept here because it reduces the stability control and the traction control automatically. This should help us get up a little bit further, or maybe even all the way. Here we go. Same exact line as before. I'm going to try not to dig out giant holes on this thing because, you know, leave the trail in good shape for the next person. And as we always like to say, as slow as possible, as fast as necessary. Oh, this is much better. I can feel wheels kind of going up and off the ground here. Even with the air suspension all the way raised up, the articulation feels pretty decent. And I'm just kind of keeping this thing at the sort of the same spot here on the throttle. And it's just kind of figuring its way up. Even though it puts out all that power, torque control is really, really easy. It's kind of sliding just a touch. I can get a touch of wheel spin, but then it's really doing a great job figuring its way up the hill here. Oh, sliding off a little bit there. So once you got this thing to the right setting, it made it up the hill with no problem at all. The traction control feels very well dialed in, and it's very easy to put out the exact amount of power that you want. That's the very kind of cool thing about these electric vehicles off-road. You get really, really precise control. If you're in a vehicle that has 3 motors or even 4, like we're going to see in the Mercedes, you're able to really precisely just dole that power out exactly where it's needed. And even in a very big, heavy vehicle like this, it did great. Okay, now it's time to see what we can do in the Mercedes. Now, the big mechanical difference between these two vehicles is that the Mercedes has 1 extra motor. So instead of a tri-motor, it is a quad motor, and all 4 of those motors are actually integrated into the frame and then drive each wheel by a half shaft. So you're able to have a fully independent front suspension, and in the rear, you're actually going to have a solid rear axle. And this setup, even though the G doesn't have the air suspension like the Hummer has, it should give it better flexibility and allow it to keep those tires on the ground a little bit better than the Hummer. And it's going to really need to do that because these tires aren't going to do it any favors. So just like the Hummer, this thing has a couple of different off-road drive modes, one of them being trail and the other one rock. We're going to start in trail, see how far it gets, and if we need to, put it in rock and then add on things as we go along. So let's see how she does. So the G has a lot less power than the Hummer does, but everything has a lot less power than the Hummer does. No slouch though, 145 horsepower coming out of each of those motors, giving it 579 total. At our test track, it did 0 to 60 in 4.4 seconds, which ties the last AMG G63 gas version that we tested. And, well, it's kind of figuring it out. We're being a little careful here because this one also comes with these optional side running boards. And we just really don't want to hang those up on anything because they are made of plastic and they will break off in an instant. Now I'm getting a message on the screen here that's actually telling me to activate low range to get up the hill. Low range is only something that you can use when you're in rock mode. So technically we're just running this thing kind of normally right now. It's able to have a low range because each of those motors individually has a transfer case, which is kind of cool. And so each of them will actually change down into low range mode when you call for it. But we may not even need it. This is insane. It is just walking up this hill. Oh my God. This is this is why we do these things, because oh my goodness. Like the tires slip for just a second and the motor is just if you had told me before we were doing this that the Hummer would need to go into basically its rock crawl mode to get up that hill, and then the G-Wagon would just walk up it on summer tires, I don't think I would have believed you, but I'm baffled. That's awesome. The traction control and stability management on this thing it's incredible. How did it do that? It has no grip. I gotta go think about some things. I had talking points that I had planned on getting to on the second run. What second run? The throttle response is basically perfect. It was super easy to just dole out the exact amount of power you needed to get up the hill. I basically put the throttle down a little bit and then it just walked up and figured everything out underneath me. We had a spotter up top, running boards didn't come into play at all. Took the exact same line as the GMC and just, it did it without using the low range. It did it without activating any of the locking. It's just stability and traction control we're on. Good on ya. So that wraps things up for us here at the hill climb, and both vehicles made it up pretty easily, I would say. But in the Mercedes, we surprisingly didn't have to even engage its most aggressive off-road drive mode. We didn't have to lock anything, put it in low range. And in the GMC, we did have to utilize its terrain mode and turn that stability control off. So even though I think the GMC can ultimately tackle more hills with its better tires and greater clearances, on this hill and on this day, the win does go to the Mercedes, and that is a big surprise. Before we head on to our next test, we just want to take a brief moment to ask you to please like and subscribe if you've been enjoying our videos so we can make more of them. And if you're in the market for a new or used vehicle, head over to Edmunds.com to get all the info you would ever need. And while you're there, you can even get an instant trade-in offer on your current set of wheels. Back to the action. We're kicking things off once more in the GMC, and there are a couple of schools of thought on the best way to load this thing in on the Ziggurat. The first way is to raise it all the way up to give us the most clearance, but if we do that, we're going to lose some articulation. So what we're going to do is we're going to try it in a few different modes, different heights, and whichever one gets us the furthest, that's the one we'll stick with. So we loaded in the Hummer a few times, and each time it basically got to the exact same spot. So right here is where we're going to call it. Right now the vehicle is in its extend mode. So this is the tallest that it can be with the most ground clearance, almost 16 inches. And in the GMC, we did have to utilize its terrain mode and turn that stability control off. So even though I think the GMC can ultimately tackle more hills with its better tires and greater clearances, on this hill and on this day, the win does go to the Mercedes, and that is a big surprise. And Hummer actually tells us that in this mode, this vehicle can scale an 18-inch vertical wall. And with the ease with which it climbed up the Ziggurat, I totally believe it. Now, this has the extreme off-road package, and that adds not only these 35-inch tires and 18-inch black wheels, but underneath, you get additional protection. So while it was up here, we got a good look at the underbody, and basically, everything is covered. There's nothing exposed. There's one giant sort of metal sheet right under the middle of the vehicle, and then additional metal protection front and rear. Nothing hanging, no differentials hanging like you get in a gas vehicle. Everything looks really well buttoned up and protected under there. And also, as a part of the extreme off-road package, we get this. Now, GMC calls it a rocker protector. That's basically a fancy name for a rock rail. It's all metal. It appears to be bolted to the frame, so really strong. Also integrated into the rock protectors are these steps, and they make it a lot easier to climb up into this giant machine. Now it's time for the Mercedes to have a turn. Loading in the Mercedes on the Ziggurat was super simple, no ride heights or anything to deal with. And as you can tell, it made it even further than the Hummer. And once again, this thing is proving that even on summer tires, it doesn't matter. It's still kind of a beast off-road. Now that it's up here, we did have a chance to check out the underside, and it's really a lot different under there than the last time we had a G-Wagon up here. When we had the gas version of the G-Wagon up here, there was a lot of things to worry about, a lot of exposed parts, especially those exhausts running down the sides. But here on the electric version, a completely different story. Underneath, basically everything is protected. You have traditional metal skid plates front and rear, and where the exhaust was is now just basically hard metal as well. Where the Mercedes is different, though, than the GMC is that that center plate is not made of metal. It's actually made of carbon fiber. And it's about 1 inch thick and weighs 127 pounds and is bolted underneath in 50 different places. Now, if you doubt the strength of this carbon fiber protection, Mercedes says that they've tested it, and I'm not sure how, but I would love to see it. And they say that it can withstand 23,605 pounds of pressure on a 2x2 inch square area. And the way that they put it was you can drop 3.5 of these electric G-Wagons on an area smaller than the bottom of a pint glass, and it won't break through the carbon fiber. The only thing today that we're really worried about is this vehicle comes with these optional side steps here, and those aren't metal. They're not rock sliders at all like we have on the GMC. They're plastic, and if we hit those on something, they'll probably snap right off. So both of these vehicles, very well protected underneath. They'll be able to handle anything that we can throw at them off-road. But here on the Ziggurat, as you can tell, the Mercedes went up a little bit further, and that makes it a clean sweep so far for the Benz. And that is a gigantic upset, nearly as big as this thing looks, especially when it's raised all the way up. Now, before we get to our next test, we thought it would be cool to show you some things that these electric off-roaders can do that we think are pretty cool. Hummer offers a feature called crab walk, which, you guessed it, kind of makes it walk like a crab. So the nose of the vehicle basically stays pointed in the same direction. When you turn the wheel, it just sort of like moves diagonally, like a crab, just without the claws. Now, this is enabled because this vehicle has 10 degrees of rear steer, and it basically makes the front and rear wheels kind of move in the same direction. Now, this system only works at speeds of up to 20 miles an hour. It is a weird feeling when you turn the wheel and the nose doesn't really turn with it. And if you get it turned over more than the rear wheels can, that's when you'll see the nose start to move. But if you saw a big Hummer EV SUV headed your way and crab walking, kind of creepy in like a really fun way. Now, they say this is because you might be on a trail and there might be instances in which you need to move diagonally, but those are going to be kind of few and far between. Is this feature all that useful? I don't think so, but is it cool? Absolutely. Now, the Mercedes has a party trick of its own, and it's called G-turn, because I guess every cool thing in this vehicle has to start with G something. So G-turn, what it does is it allows you to basically spin the vehicle around in the spot that it's standing in. Now, to engage this, you have to be in the rock drive setting, which we are, had to have the low range engaged, which we do, and then you hit this button right here on the dash, and this screen comes up that tells you that it's ready to do a G-turn. There are also sensors around the vehicle that make sure the vehicle is level and on flat ground. So now that we have this thing turned on, if I want to go left, I actually hit the left paddle. If I want to go right, I hit the right paddle, and it'll do 2 complete revolutions without stopping. So let's try left first. All right, so I'm going to hold down the left paddle here, take my foot off the brake, and hit the accelerator. Oh. Yeah, basically almost 2 revolutions. I think I should do one to the right just to make sure it works. Hold down the right paddle, foot off the brake, and go. Kind of feels like riding one of those mechanical bulls. Like there's a lot of things bouncing around, but you're not really going anywhere. Yeah, it's very cool. Is it very useful? I'm not sure. I actually think that G steering function that it has is way more useful. It can actually drag the inside rear wheel when you're on a trail and you're crawling around and make the turn radius real short, just like Ford's trail turn assist. That probably not as cool, but very useful. This, not as useful, still very cool. Now it's time for our final test, the pipes. And since we were here last, someone came and dumped a fresh pile of rocks onto it, so it looks a little bit different than when we were here before. And some of these rocks, I think, are going to make it actually pretty difficult for the Mercedes to even get up onto this obstacle. Now, last time we were out here with the G-Wagon, it was pretty stressful. But in the GMC, things should be different because it's kind of made for this. So we're approaching the pipes right now. Got my spotter out there. We are fully raised up in extract mode, so just about 16 inches of ground clearance. It's kind of hard to see out of this thing though, because you do have big windows, but you're so high up and you're in such a weird kind of position. The saving grace is that you have a wonderful, wonderful camera system. The Extreme Off-Road package actually adds underbody cameras, so I can even see what's going on underneath the vehicle in this view here. So you can see the rocks kind of passing just straight underneath here, and if those things get muddy or dirty, they even have a washer to clean them off. So we've got lots and lots of ground clearance. Really, the only thing that we're worried about here is kind of the weight and the size of this thing. It's super, super wide. So we're actually only able to keep one tire on the course at some points. There's just so much clearance, and the angles on this thing are absolutely ridiculous. Like we're talking 46-degree approach and departure angles. And that means that even on something like this that's so uneven, that requires so much clearance, just crawls over it super easy. This part is where a lot of vehicles struggle, because getting up onto this first pipe on this second section of this obstacle is a problem. And here, don't even have to really slow down to reposition the vehicle. I can just drive straight over it. I will say this though, when you do have to give it a bit more throttle to get up onto something, it can be a little bit jumpy as you're coming down. Now this thing may not have a low range like the Mercedes does, but in this L mode, it's pretty easy to control the torque and get yourself over obstacles with a lot of dexterity, especially for something that weighs 9,000 pounds. So GMC has successfully completed the pipes. Let's see what the Mercedes can do. So we're going to try to load this in the same way sort of we did the GMC, get it straight up there, check out the clearance. With that big rock that I can see that I was looking at before, I don't think we'll be able to get onto the pipes this way, so we'll have to do a little detour to try to do the rest of it. Just like though in the GMC, the Mercedes has some great surround view cameras. And this is a big departure because the last generation of the G, the last G-Wagon we had out here, it didn't even have a surround view camera. All it had was a rear view camera. And this one has this crazy one where it makes the hood of the vehicle appear transparent, and I can see exactly where those front tires are. Now, I'm not getting underbody cameras like I got in the Hummer, but this, it's still pretty cool. So as you can see, my left front tire here is right on this pipe, and I'm coming up to the first. Gonna check with my spotter. He has a big frown on his face. Okay, so if at first you don't succeed, just drive around and try a different route. Now, these 3 buttons right here will be familiar to anyone who's driven a G-Wagon previously, because those used to control the differential locks. But here they control different things. You have your low range button in the middle, So right now you can tell we're in the low range, but these two buttons, which would normally control differential locks, you don't get to control those anymore. Those are virtual. So like I mentioned before, it has the capability to lock the rear, but all that happens without intervention from the driver. It's all happening just kind of seamlessly without me controlling it. And I know that will turn off some people, but so far today, the system has proved itself pretty useful. So as you can see underneath the vehicle there's a rock that we didn't really anticipate being a problem, and it ended up catching the center point of that carbon skid plate. The approach angle of this vehicle is actually better than the gas version because it's got a little bit of extra ground clearance, about 1/2 inch. So the approach and departure angles are better. However, if you look at the breakover angle, it's actually worse in this vehicle by a few degrees, and that's because of the big carbon plate. It makes for just a completely flat floor, and what happened was we center pointed on that rock. We didn't damage anything on the bottom part of the vehicle. The plate did its job. So out of our 3 tests that we did today, the Mercedes takes the win on 2 of them, and the GMC takes the win on the final one by a very good margin because it got over the pipes, while the Mercedes, well, it couldn't even really get on. What did we learn today? We learned that in some ways, the more motors, the better. We recently had a dual motor Rivian R1T, full off-road everything, and it really struggled in one of our previous videos. And then today we had the GMC with 3 motors, and it did much better. And then we have the Mercedes with its 4 motors, even better still. On a street summer tire, this thing basically did everything that we asked of it until its clearance ran out. The tire wasn't even really an issue, and that was kind of shocking to me. It shows that if you have smart engineering, a bunch of motors, and ways to distribute torque really evenly, that you can kind of overcome a lack of grip even on a dusty hill climb or loading in on the Ziggurat. Now, when it comes to which one I would rather take home, it gets a little bit more complicated because the GMC, even though it's very expensive, this vehicle is about $120,000, that thing costs way more. It costs about 70 grand more. So if your goal is to get the vehicle that offers you the best bang for your buck when it comes to performance, when it comes to off-road capability, when it comes to being able to go anywhere and get back, the GMC is probably the better option. However, in every other way, pretty much, I prefer the Mercedes. I think that it's better to drive on the street. I think it's better to drive on a dirt road. I like its interior way more. I think it's way more comfortable. I think it rides better. I think it looks significantly better. And that's even before you factor in the cool factor from those old school sounding doors. Looking at the Hummer EV SUV, there's nothing that it really has in common with the Hummers of old. It's basically a brand new entity from the way it looks and feels to the way that it drives. It's very capable, just like the old for sure, but there's no Hummer from old inside of this vehicle. But in the Mercedes, it's the opposite. You can see the G-Wagon DNA just flowing through it from the way it looks, from the way the doors close, from the interior. It still looks and feels like a G-Wagon, just thoroughly updated to be more capable and with a powertrain that can do some really wicked cool things. So for me, the choice is pretty simple. I would go home in the Mercedes, even though it cost me a lot more dough to do so. Thanks for watching.